institutions are important stakeholders in climate change adaptation and resilience building. Many initiatives and partnerships have emerged in the past few years to meaningfully connect communities, academic and research institutions. We will hear about some of these initiatives today and also explore together success factors and challenges to foster their uptake and scale up in the region. I would like to let you know that you can be using the chat box if you have any questions, and speakers have been briefed and they will try to answer your questions during the session. I would also like to inform you that there'll be a very short poll after the opening remarks and also an anonymous survey at the end of the webinar. Thank you. Next. So I will just briefly go over the agenda. So after introducing our moderator, we will take a brief group picture with our speakers. Then we will hear opening remarks from MOAJ and UNEP. Then a short poll will follow. We will hear from 4 different initiatives in the region. And then after the presentations, we will invite the audience to participate in a short interactive exercise to also hear about your own experiences and lessons learned. And then it will be followed by a short summary and closing. Next. So today, our moderator for the session is Rachel Noon-Christian. She has worked and conducted research in the field of science communication and outreach in the Asia-Pacific region for more than 10 years. Her role at the PCCC's PrEP aims to strengthen partnerships between the producers and users of weather and climate information to support inclusive access to usable, understandable, and actionable risk reduction measures. Rachel, now over to you. Thank you.
Helen, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and maybe a late night for some of you, depending on the time differences. I'd like to request the tech team if you could just stop screen sharing for a second, and I'll just ask all the panelists if we could just take a group photo, please. And we just like to ask the participants just to bear with us for a quick moment while we do this. Thank you so much. Okay, can I confirm that the group photo, the screenshot has been taken, please?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you, Helen. Okay, moving on to our next presenters. For the opening remarks, we have 2 distinguished guests with us today. Our first speaker is Ms. Yuko Yoshida, who is the Deputy Director of Climate Change Adaptation Office for the Ministry of Environment for the Government of Japan. She focuses on strengthening and deepening international collaborations with multiple stakeholders to facilitate adaptation actions in the Asia-Pacific region. Our speaker after that will be Ms. Isabel Luis. She is the Deputy Regional Director for UNEP Asia and the Pacific. She has over 25 years of experience in sustainable development, natural resource management, program management, and multi-stakeholder engagement. She coordinates UNEP's work program in the region pursuant to UNEP's mandate to support member states on the environment and sustainability-related issues. Ms. Yuko Yoshida, I'd like to pass the time over to you now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Today I wear a mask because I'm working in the office. So yeah, and then it's my pleasure to join this webinar, and I am honored to have an opening remarks. The Glasgow Climate Pact highlights the urgency of scaling up actions and support, including finance, capacity building, and technology transfer to enhance adaptive capacity, strengthen resilience, and reduce vulnerability to climate change. The IPCC also pointed out the urgency of adaptation action in its sixth assessment report, which reflects that enabling conditions are key for implementing, accelerating, and sustaining adaptation in human systems and ecosystems. The latest progress report in implementing activities under the Nairobi Work Program shed light on some issues and challenges on enhancing adaptation actions by closing gaps in knowledge on adaptation and resilience. The report suggested that knowledge products need to be accessible to and tailored to the needs of the target users. It's also pointed out that further modalities need to be developed and implemented for enabling knowledge users to implement adaptation action. The first APAN webinar today is one of the highly motivated efforts to discussing good practices and challenges involving different stakeholders from the local community and academia, and catalyzing new adaptation actions. Expanding partnerships between academics and local communities to increase locally led adaptation is one solution, which responds to the challenges relating to knowledge gaps raised by Nairobi Work Program. I hope this webinar would be a good opportunity for the participants, local communities, and researchers to compare notes about successful examples and challenges, and to scale up partnerships between local communities and academic institutions. Thank you very much.
Ms. Yuko Yoshida, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you so much for those wonderful opening remarks. I'd like to pass the time over now to Dr. Isabel Luis, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, to all the organizers. And thank you very much, Yoshida-san, for your opening remarks. We would like to convey our sincere gratitude to the Ministry of the Environment, Japan, for your continued support to the Asia-Pacific Adaptation Network, APAN, since 2009, in order to mobilize adaptation and resilience knowledge. Good afternoon, dear participants, and from various parts of the world. Good morning, good evening. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this webinar on engaging with academic institutions to close local adaptation knowledge gaps in the Asia-Pacific region. And I'm privileged to open this session on behalf of the United Nations Environment Program Regional Office in Bangkok. For those who join us here today for the first time, APAN is an open network that strives to equip adaptation practitioners throughout the Asia-Pacific region with the knowledge and means to design, implement, monitor, and report on climate change adaptation measures, to foster access to technologies and finance, and to increase capacity for integrating climate change adaptation into national, sectoral, and local development policies, strategies, and plans. Today marks the start of a journey of APAN's seminar series this year, focused on enhancing the understanding of key outcomes from the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26. As such, in the coming months, we look forward to touching on issues of relevance such as locally led adaptation, loss and damage, and the global goal on adaptation. Dear participants, as we all know, 2021 was a difficult year, not just because of COVID and the pandemic, but also intense heat waves and extreme rainfall, devastating fires, and devitalizing droughts were among the extreme weather events that the world faced, in addition to the crippling effects of the pandemic. Extreme weather events and less visible slow onset events are here to stay. The latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC report, projected that global warming is likely to reach 1.5 degrees between 2030 and 2052. And rising temperature increases likelihood of the threat of heat waves across Asia, droughts in and in areas of West, Central, and South Asia, delays and weakening of the monsoon circulation in South Asia, floods in monsoon regions in South, Southeast, and East Asia, and glacier melting in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. Local communities in small island developing states, the SIDS, and least developed countries, the LDCs, especially the most vulnerable, the youth, the women, the elderly, the indigenous peoples, disabled, displaced, are at the front line of climate change. However, due to entrenched poverty, historical injustices, and marginalization, they have had very little say in the global response to the climate crisis. To participants, successful climate change adaptation and resilience interventions will require, among other needs, a sustained engagement from a broad range of stakeholders: civil society, private sector, academic and research institutes, examples, with diverse interests, contributions, capacities, and vulnerabilities. And of course, we need the effective management of sharing and learning of knowledge, traditional, local, indigenous peoples, technical, and scientific. In this whole space, academic and research institutions are well positioned to support addressing local knowledge gaps, bringing up local, traditional, and indigenous knowledge, and connecting it with scientific and technical knowledge, designing innovative, locally driven adaptation and resilience solutions, and leading bottom-up research and creating enabling conditions for community-based initiatives. During the pandemic, these institutions adapted fairly quickly and found alternative ways to engage communities, conduct participatory research, and share adaptation and resilience knowledge, while social platforms, social media platforms, WhatsApp groups, and many other social and online ways of engaging, such as even community radio programs, among other means. So we should not forget that these academic and research institutions are mobilizing a new generation. University students and early career researchers are key in adaptation and resilience planning, implementation, and monitoring. As UNEP's Executive Director, Inga Anderson, recently said, young people have helped reshape the whole global climate debate because they know that they'll be the ones that could inherit a broken planet. So dear participants, with this session, APAN aims to foster the uptake and scale up of partnerships between academic and research institutions and local stakeholders to increase locally relevant adaptation and resilience actions. I'm excited to see that many diverse partnerships and initiatives will be sharing how they involve academic and research institutes in the region to solve local climate adaptation and resilience challenges. On behalf of the United Nations Action Program, I once again would like to take this opportunity to make thanks and gratitude to all the key partners that have supported and taken part in contributing to this webinar and to the organizers. I wish you a successful dialogue today. Thank you.
Ms. Yuko Yoshida and Dr. Isabel Luis, thank you so much for your opening remarks. I think you both set the scene so wonderfully for this webinar. I'd like to ask the moderator if she could just pull up the Zoom poll. I believe we'll be moving to that in the next section. I'd like to allow for 1 minute, if possible, from all participants. I can see that we have around 120 at the moment, so we're really keen to know which region you're joining us from today for this webinar. We'd also really like to know what type of organization you represent, and we'd like to see those results on screen very soon. Thank you so much, Helen. Okay, so if I may just ask Helen if she could just show us the opening poll results. So it looks like we have a lot of participants from Southeast Asia, around 65%. This is a really great number. We have a lot spread out from East Asia, South Asia, a few from the the other regions, and about 6% from the Pacific. So it looks like we're a pretty diverse, geographically diverse group today, and we're really happy to have you all on board. If we could just see the results of the second question, please. It also seems like for the second question, most of the institutions. So that's really good to have you all on board today. And we hope for some really fruitful discussions between your organizations and the other agencies that are represented today. Thank you so much. Okay, we will move on to our, I'd like to open, sorry, if we could go to the next slide, please, tech team. Thank you so much. I would like to introduce our next 3 speakers today. So our first speaker is Dr. K, is the EPIC Network Asia Coordinator and a lecturer at the Thammasat University in Thailand. Kay is a passionate academic researcher who is interested in sustainable development, climate change resilience, and political ecology. Our second speaker, Nontarit, Dr. Nontarit is a PhD, Nontarit is a PhD candidate in integrated science of built environment at the Faculty of Architecture and Planning, also at Thammasat University in Thailand. His research interests are urban resilience, economic resilience, and land use planning. Our third speaker for EPIC Asia today is Marek Alelo, is the director of Polytechnic Negeri Manado. She is also teaching in the tourism department and has conducted research on tourism, ecotourism, and sustainable tourism. So our 3 presenters today are from the Educational Partnerships for Innovation in Communities Asia, or EPIC Asia for short. Apologies if I've mispronounced your names or your affiliations, but I'd like to now invite you all to start your presentations. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. The tech team, can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you so much, everyone. So my name is Kay Natawikom Pantuwong Pakdi. As already mentioned, I'm the EPIC and Asia coordinator. So today I'm going to talk about the EPIC model. So something that we have been trying in the Southeast Asia region in order to connect both the university and the city together in order to solve several city problems. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes, so basically how the model works is we realize that in many cities around the world, cities have constrained capacity, also have some limited resources to access new knowledge and are risk averse. But cities also have many problems. They're trying many ways in order to improve the livelihood of the people who are living in the cities. So we were thinking that if we can connect the cities with the universities, because university, as everybody knows, is where many professors, many lecturers are working. They have many knowledge, they have access capacity, countless number of students, a lot of them are willing to work with many partners in order to improve the city they are living or studying in. They have unlimited access to new knowledge, and they're also very innovative. So people might be asking, but in Asia in particular, a lot of universities have already been working with cities. So what is the big model? How different we are? The difference is that we are trying to solve the real world problem that already exists in the cities. Most of the existing partnership are usually start from the lecturer or from their interest. Also, a lot of works that are being done today are usually focused on the lecturers or the researchers. And we also want to engage the student into the spectrum, want to let the student try to solve the problem as part of their curriculum without changing any existing course models. So for example, if lecturer already teach a class on, let's say, urban planning, they can use real world problems in order to teach the students. The example we have engaged is in Chiang Mai city, which is in the northern part of Thailand. The city have a problem with the moat, the waterway around the cities. So they engage with the lecturer who teach environmental science. So the lecturer have to teach students how to test water anyway. So the lecturer can always ask students to go around, collect water samples, bring it back to the lab and teach them how to do it. It's very simple. So what if we can connect university instructor, existing courses, existing local project, at that magnify for all, at a scale that magnifies value for all. So that basically the model that we are trying to do. Can I have the next slide, please? Next, please. So EPIC-N come from Educational Partnership for Innovation in Community Network. So basically education partner with community and trying to be innovative in solving a lot of problems. Next slide, please. EPIC model is unique, large-scale matching of local issues and existing causes. We emphasize on existing causes. We don't want to disturb any established relationship in the universities and in the city. So we want to utilize whatever the university already have and try to minimize the money as much as we can. Can I have the next slide, please? So EPIC-N Asia partnership engaged with the Ministry of Environment, Government of Japan, Thriving Earth Exchange, Second Nature, Global Adaptation Network, which is part of the UNEP, ICLEI, STAR International, and UNFCCC. So in the past year, UNEP from GAN office generously provide seed grant to 11 universities in Southeast Asia and Nepal. Can I have the next slide, please? So the past year, we engaged with 3 universities in Thailand, 3 universities in Malaysia, 1 university in Vietnam, 1 polytechnic in Indonesia, 2 universities in the Philippines, and 1 in Nepal. So most of them engage with different problems, like Chiang Mai has already explained about water quality, Thammasat University about green space, and also partly deal with climate change. AIT deal with waste management, and we also have Indonesia who are working in waste management, urban farming. In Vietnam, working with flooding. Indonesia also flooding as well. Philippines flooding and warning. Kathmandu is in about city planning. So working with these 11 universities, we have 2 very good examples today, and they will be talking about their lessons. They were talking about the experience engaging using the EPIC-N program. So first, we will have Nontarit, who is a PhD student. He is the student who engaged in this program. His work is on public green space in Hat Yai city in the southern part of Thailand. And as you know, green space is not just creating green area for the city, but it can be utilized in many other ways. And our second example comes from Merit K, who is the director of Polytechnic Negeri Manado in North Sulawesi, Indonesia. So in her university, in her polytechnic, she engaged students in the work on providing real-time and updated flooding prevention systems with the city of Manado. So can I have Kun Nantarit, please?
Thank you, Kay. And I would like to thank APAN for this opportunity for me to share our work, collaboration between Hat Yai Municipality and Thammasat University. Next slide, please. First of all, I would like to share the reason for the collaboration between Thammasat University and Hat Yai Municipality. Can you click the slide again, please? Okay, thank you. First, Hat Yai being the largest city in Songkhla province and the main city of the largest metropolitan in southern part of Thailand, has been trying to steer its urban planning and economic activity toward the sustainable path. Many cities in Thailand have relatively low public green space. However, park, urban forest, tree-lined street, river bank support urban well-being by providing space for rest, relaxation, exercise, and support local economic. With the threat of climate change threatening Hat Yai city, relevant authorities want to utilize parks, public green space as the part of way to tackle with the effect of climate change. Studies have proven that park can help reduce urban heat island effect if appropriately designed. Floodable park can control flow rate and decrease flow peak by storing surplus water, releasing it slow once the flooding has passed. However, before Hat Yai can even think of the design, they must first be able to identify existing clean public space where the potential area in the city, which can develop into more clean space. So the local need, the local problem that Kay tell us is lead for the collaboration between Hat Yai and Thammasat University through EPIC-N model, where the local need meet academic expert. So what we, Thammasat University can support the local government in terms of providing the research arrange and collecting public clean space to support clean city development. At the same time, the student, me and my colleague, Mr. Pachara, we are doing thesis in Hat Yai city. And our topic related on public clean space development and land use planning for economic resilient development in the city. Next slide, please. From our collaboration, I can summarize that the critical success factor that we experience and we learn, which are trust building between local authority leaders with the university team and student, because Thammasat University located in central part of Thailand. So we have little small chance to have site visit and on-site meeting with the municipality. So we have to arrange online meeting to know each other, to share and to learn each other, to building trust between two organizations in order to work to research for this collaboration. Moreover, another important factor that I would like to share is long-term collaboration activity planning with the local municipality. This factor is really important because, as I mentioned, that university team and local municipality officer, we don't know each other before. So when we collaborate, we meeting, we try to learn each other, we know our expertise. We also know what local government problem. So when we plan to have the further development activities, so we can set the timeline, we can set the activity that we can collaborate in the future. So this make local municipality, they feel that we won't leave them after the EPIC model finish, because they're afraid that if our collaboration finish, so university team will not support local municipality in expert, academic expert or technical term to support them. So that's why this factor is quite really success factor for the collaboration. In the other hand, for the key challenge, as I mentioned, that Thammasat University located in the central part of Thailand. So in Hat Yai municipality, we have only one faculty of architect and planning in the city. So this lack of expert in planning and in design make for us really difficulty to travel to site visit. So the distance that we challenge, distance problem is one of the key challenge. Moreover, two factors that are really challenge for our collaboration in the future also, which is the continuity of local government leader. Because if they will have new election and we don't know who will become the new mayor, so we like to have to rebuild, restart, like have another, take time, more time to count one, to like the further the collaboration with the new mayor. And another key challenge is limitation of local budget. in order to support this collaboration like EPIC model, the local municipality, they didn't set the budget to support university team and to drive this kind of collaboration. So we also need to seek for new funding to support this type of collaboration in the future also. So this is from my experience that I can share to you. Thank you very much.
Nontari, thank you so much for your insightful words and for the great start to these presentations. Ms. Marek, sorry, if I could just ask you, we're running a little bit over time.
Yes.
So I don't want to miss out on your presentation, but if we could just try and stick to maybe 2 to 3 minutes, if that would be okay with you.
It's okay, it's okay.
I'd like to hand the time over to you now. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a collaboration. We have been awarded with the SEED grant and collaboration to develop flood early warning system. Next slide, please. So this is North Sulawesi, and we are concentrating in Manado with this population, more than 400,000. Next slide, please. This is our institution. Yeah, next slide, please. This is a MOU signing. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is also one of our collaboration with the government, and this project has been awarded by the Ministry of Tourism to develop a tourism village. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so I'm not going into a detail because the time is very limited, but we can see that this is some of the critical success factors in developing the collaboration that we are from the very beginning in building the collaboration. We have to finding the common grounds and understanding with the government. And the second one, to make them realize that this is the needs, they need this, but sometimes they do not realize that they need that. We have to make them recognize the need. And in the collaborations, we should make them aware that there is a mutual benefit between those institutions, because if they don't have, they cannot see the benefits, they are not going to be interested. And the transferability or the deliverability of that collaboration and intensive communication, simplifications of many complexities, and it must be followed up by a written agreement. In the planning, it's very important to engage the relevant participant during the planning. From the very beginning, the local community must be actively involved, and we must set measurable and achievable objectives. And it's also important to plan a champion, reliable and trustable contacts in both sides, in the university and the local community. And also we have to break down the hierarchy, responsibility. There are many positions, there are many level of in the village that we need to break down so we can understand who are going to deliver, who are going to do what needs to be done. Adequacy of resources, scheduling, especially workable plan, and setting the duration, determining the court tasks, projections, determining the projections and estimates, and from the very beginning, the transparency and accountability of the collaboration should be displayed. And sometimes the plan cannot be achieved as we expected, so there must be a contingency plan during the collaboration. During the implementations, we have to be sensitive to the local cultures, because even though we have a very good plan, but if we ignore that, sometimes it will be a disaster. And we have to show promptness in responses when there is a problem in the collaboration, continuous communication to ensure that everybody is in the path to achieve the expected goals, and monitoring. In sustaining the project, it's important to to develop regular contacts. And for us in polytechnics, to ensure that this program is sustainable, we have to integrate that in our curriculum, in our project, so it will be sustained not only financially, but also in the program. And also for the community, we are helping them to find another resources if the project is already terminated. And the challenges, the last slide, please. Yeah, so during the building of the collaboration, we have to realize that there's a lot of interests and objectives. Lacking of communications is also a challenge. And during the planning, because it is a bottom-up planning, it's required a lot of time, different in cultures from academic and the people, and sometimes unrecognized influential actors in the community, even though we already have official people who are responsible for the program, but sometimes unrecognized people there, they have also their own power, even though it's not official, and they have to be included in this program. Setting the parameters for success is very important. And during the implementation, it's important to engage the sleeping partner, even though we have a very good plan, but sometimes our partner are very passive. They are not easily engaged. Building accountability and trust during the program, maintaining the interest and the tempo. Sometimes it's getting slow, and it's very it's compulsory to be responsible, so the tempo of the work, the project can be done on time. And there are many force majeure, emergency that we need to take care of. This is some of the key challenges that we are facing. And how are we going to sustain the project? We have to help the community to develop commercial mindset, that when the program or the collaboration is ended or terminated, they have the possibility to continue. And it is important to develop a commercial mindset. And what we are facing also, like the presentation before, saying that the changing of organizational leadership in the community and institution sometimes also have a huge impact in the program. The program can be easily terminated many times. So it is important to include this program, to integrate all the collaborations in the institution program. Well, thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Marek, and thank you so much to our speakers from the EPIC Network Asia. I think that that sets the scene really nicely for our next few presentations, and I'd like to pass the time over now to our two presenters. If we could go to the next slide, please, tech team. Our next two presenters are from the Institute for Global Environment Strategies, or IGES, and the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, and the Himalayan University Consortium, or HUC. So our first speaker is Dr. Binaya. He is currently engaged in designing capacity building approaches for climate change adaptation, mostly focusing on local level resilience building. He is also promoting indigenous and local knowledge for climate change adaptation, as well as local level disaster risk reduction and climate change integration. Our second speaker will be Dr. Shachi. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Shachi has revived a dormant network of poor quality membership and turned HUC into a thriving consortium of almost 90 members. She has led the HUC Academy, a flagship intensive field school catering to early and mid-career researchers on the topics of climate change, adaptation, and resilience building for the HKH, and facilitated the formation and successful operation of several communities of practice. Dr. Binaya, I'd like to hand the time over to you now. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Rachel, for this nice introduction. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. First, we are grateful to APAN for this opportunity, and we are delighted to introduce our collaborative initiative on this promoting indigenous and local knowledge in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. As you may know, this region is one of the hottest spots impacted by climate change impact, having high degree of vulnerability, and it's also home to numerous indigenous and local knowledge. So indigenous and local knowledge is very close to the idea of locally led adaptation and its principles, such as devolving decision-making at the local level, addressing inequalities, or investing on local capabilities in sustainable manner. So next slide, please. Let me walk you through some basic information about the importance of why we are talking about indigenous and local knowledge. And we see an increased highlight of this indigenous and local knowledge, let me say ILK, in this policy document like Paris Agreement, in several NDCs, and also in IPCC assessment, including the recent AR6. And they mainly stress on the integration of knowledge system with modern technology and how we mainstream this indigenous local knowledge. And there are mainly two reasons for do this. Is first being that ILK are often the default response choice available to the local communities. So that means in the second point, it's logical to invest on what is already there than establishing something new. So that's, I think, the main point, catch. But there are a lot of challenges. So that means how we diffuse this ILK in the adaptation planning process. So first, I mean, ILK are very diverse in cultural language practices, and also they are geographically distributed. So it's very difficult to identify them. So we do not have a system to how we trace and validate that utilities for adaptation. So we need tools and methods, and as well as, and there's most importantly, there is a risk that ILK could be lost over time because they are mostly confined to senior citizens and often less attractive for youth to take part in its promotion. And ILK themselves could reach to their limit for adaptation with worsening climate impact. Okay, so next slide, please. And what we are aiming is to create a kind of science, media, and community interface to address these challenges while also attracting youth participation. So what we are doing is we are first building capacity of the local media as a vehicle for increasing awareness on indigenous and local knowledge and adaptation. So for that we collaborate with Community Radio Association, AMARC Asia Pacific, and we organize this training on how to effectively communicate. So including like creating radio programs or using like tools like photography, so different way of expression. And second important is we also engage with university and youth for two reasons. So first is we helping to identify and validate indigenous and local knowledge, and then blending of science and ILK. And there, I think, and here also we mainly focus on youth. We call for cases submission targeting youth about ILK. And also in one case in Pakistan, we have that startup competition in which we also promoted one selection of one indigenous and local knowledge. And besides that, we ultimately we want to promote the bottom-up innovation to integrate ILK into local adaptation planning. So in all this role, I mean, these are the activities, but what we think a bit beyond further is the role of academic and research through youth engagement. And for that, Dr. Sachi will shed light on how we envision overall approach from the viewpoint of Himalayan University Consortiums at CED that she is coordinating. So over to you, Sachi. Next slide, please.
Binaya. Before going into the content of this particular presentation, I'd like just to give a very brief overview of the network, just to, in fact, resonate with our previous speakers of EPIC. Our philosophy is very much similar to your line of thought, that we come from the recognition that, in fact, it's time for university and education in general to open it up across its world to go to the community instead. And we come from the recognition that there's a lack of relevance of university education and community need. The universities in this particular part of the world tend to look west or look north, look up to the north, look to the west, and adopt the curriculum from those first world country without so much incorporation of the local knowledge and the need and the demand coming from the communities to which we supposed to serve. So again, the lack of relevance and accountability of university is what prompts us to come together as a consortium to do things differently, to take education out of the classroom and return to the community where we serve. This is the philosophy that promotes us to come together. Now, the core value of us is the mountain focus, or upstream and downstream linkages, because again, mountain and downstream are so very connected. We very much respect diversity, and by diversity we means not just the resources, but also cultural, religious, linguistic diversity. And in terms of the forms of knowledge, local indigenous knowledge, it is what a set that each community have and can share to scientists, and knowledge has an equal importance value to each of the communities that should come together on equal footing. Now, the next part of the values that we share is the leadership. And I also resonate with our earlier speakers who talk about the difficulty and challenges in terms of, how to keep sleeping partners. Now, what we learn is, in fact, ownership. That's actually, if you have the ownership across the partners that Binaya will show you in the countries that these particular APN project been implementing, all partners find the ownership in the project from the very proposal drafting scratch. So ownership is what guarantee partnership and the shared leadership. In fact, Binaya and myself, we are very much at the back seat, and the driver's seat is our partners who are in the field, who take the knowledge to the local communities in indigenous local language through local radio. So again, shared leadership and ownership, it's what matters. Next slide, please. Just before giving back to Binaya, I'd like just to highlight the important part of the curriculum uptake in terms of lasting impact, because each of your project, I've heard from the previous two speakers, and of course, Kay, when you give them overview, each of our research project or intervention has its own sort of limited time length, project-based, so to speak. So when the project completes, who will take it on in terms of the knowledge and skills? So what we do is step a bit further ahead and forward in taking up back into the university. And by university, I would like to emphasize again that we no longer think of university as a ivory tower of knowledge that is isolated from the community. So we would like to emphasize the importance of uptaking the new skills and knowledge back into education. And not just university education, it has to also be based to K-12, continual learning, adult learning. And we would like to highlight transformative learning here, because we believe that learning is never end for an individual's life, and change starts from individual level in terms of knowledge, action, and attitude and behavior. So we talk about green economies, we talk about skills, capacity building. It starts from individual recognition. So I just wrap up my contribution here, and back to you, Binay.
Okay, thank you, Sachi. Can we have next slide, please? So, I think, let me then summarize. I think while we have basically three things we are really interested in this. So one is we need to identify, validate, and document about the potential of ILK, how we can synthesize in a systematic manner. That's very essential. And then we need to also fill the capacity gaps to communicate the ILK. So ILK here means just not ILK, but local-led initiatives. So there is a huge capacity back. So that's how we want to see a different mode of communication. And then also we want to see how we could connect this local level ILK initiatives including progress, gaps, and challenges to higher level. So that's, without that, we will be always, I think there is a huge differentiation, and that's how we can bridge the gap between what is anticipated, like in Paris Agreement, what is being called it from IPCC report, and to the real action. So here, and I just summarize some of the success factors and challenges. That means we need to, the success factor, and they are very much interrelated. So we need to validate and document ILK. We need to also think about research and capacity building for knowledge integration, and how we involve local media, and how we promote this bottom-up innovation. While we have a challenge to address like how we deal with the diversity and how we can attract youth to prevent loss of knowledge system, how we create most importantly investment model for attracting finance and upscaling, which I mean ILK so far is not so much attractive in the absence of like this kind of model. There is a huge acknowledgement, but we don't know how to do that. So, and then also we need to think about communication. So with that, I'd like to end by thanking our collaborators, community radios, and also, as well as APN for supporting this initiative, and all the participants here who for listening. Thank you very much. Over to you, Jill.
Dr. Binaya, Dr. Shachi, thank you so much for your contributions. You both made some very valid points, especially in terms of long-term sustainability of such projects, and the critical importance of involving communities from the start. I think is something that came through very strongly in these presentations. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next presentations, I'd like to just welcome any questions that the participants may have. If you could pop them in the Q&A chat box, and we'd like our esteemed panelists to be able to answer those at your convenience throughout this session. Thank you so much. Tech team, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. Okay, our next presenters, I'd like to introduce from the International International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUC. Our first presenter today is Katie. So Katie has been supporting the regional implementation of the Mekong Web Project, which aims to promote the conservation, restoration, and management of Ramsar sites to strengthen climate change adaptation in wetland communities. Our second speaker today will be from the MWUN. So Dr. Triet has been working on wetland research and conservation in the Mekong region for the past 22 years. He is one of the founders of the Mekong Wetland University Network. I'd like to invite Katie now, please, for your remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. So I'm sure many of you are already aware that wetlands, both coastal and inland wetlands, are essential for climate change adaptation and mitigation as well. So with this in mind, IUCN develops the Mekong Web Project, which is a 5-year initiative in Cambodia, Laos PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam that aims to build climate resilience by understanding and highlighting the benefits of wetlands in the region and promoting the conservation, management, and restoration of these ecosystems to provide benefits to people. So to do this, the project developed a climate change vulnerability assessment tool specifically for wetlands, to help site managers understand the current and future climate threats to species, ecosystems, and community livelihoods that depend on wetlands. So the VA tool was piloted in 10 Ramsar sites in the 4 countries. And the results of this really informed the development of a series of ecosystem-based adaptation measures to be implemented with CSOs, communities, and local governments to strengthen local resilience. The project, when we look back on it, was largely successful due to a number of networks, especially a really strong partnership that we had with the Mekong Wetlands University Network, which helped implement a lot of the trainings through the program. And I'll let Dr. Triet explain this in more detail. Over to you, Dr. Triet.
Thank you, Katie, for your introduction. My name is Tran Triet. I am the director of the Southeast Asia program of the International Crane Foundation. ICF in short. We based in Wisconsin in the United States. How a nonprofit research organization in the United States, particularly in Wisconsin, is involved in the Mekong region. We've been working in Southeast Asia for the past 30 years. And of course, our organization focused on the 15 species of cranes, one of which live in the Mekong River catchment. Naturally, we're interested in the cranes and also in the habitat where the crane live with our wetland ecosystem, and also interested in working with local communities who share the same habitat with the crane. So that's our mission, to work on crane, on habitat, and on local communities. As I said, we've been working in the Mekong region for the past 30 years, and we understand the shortage of expertise related to wetland management. It's quite expensive for country in the region to send their students abroad for high-level training. So we were talking a lot with our colleagues in the region, and we came up with the idea, why don't we team up, university in the region to join force in producing high-quality training for the lecturer and researcher at university in the region, and focus on wetland ecosystem. So exactly 20 years ago this month, in May 2002, the Mekong Wetland University Network was established, at first with 8 universities from 4 countries, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. And the International Crane Foundation was also one of the founding member of the network. After 20 years of development, now we have a network of 24 universities from all 6 Mekong countries, and also Malaysia, and several universities in the United States are partner of the network. We focus on training a young lecturer and researcher from the university on wetlands ecology, wetland management, with the original focus was to provide knowledge and experience for those young people, so that they can begin to do research on wetlands, and perhaps some of them can begin teaching on wetland ecology and management at their institutions. During the past 20 years, training is one of our main activity, and we training first very academically. Our training course were equivalent to a 3 credit university course at the upper undergraduate level, or even at master degree level. And the credit were recognized by all universities, meaning the participant of the training course can bring back the credit they earned from the training to apply to the credit and needed for their program at their own university. But during the past 3 years, we partner with IUCN Asia, and instead of training researcher and lecturer at the university, the past 3 years, we train the people who are directly manage protected area in country of the Mekong region, wetland manager, and also governmental official who responsibility are directly involved with managing wetland ecosystem. So during the past 3 years, we organized one regional training workshop to train the trainer for 30 university lecturers in 4 countries that involved in the Mekong Web program that Katie just mentioned. And from that, the trainer from the 4 countries came back to their country and develop and deliver national training workshop for wetland manager. And altogether, we organized 4 national training workshops for 120 wetland managers from 4 countries. During the course of the past 3 years, we also implement one regional research project focusing on invasive alien species on protected wetland. And the project was implemented at 12 wetland sites in 4 countries. Most of these wetland are wetland of international importance, or Ramsar site, they often call. So the context of our activity during the past 3 years in collaboration with IUCN is it's a regional operation involving 4 countries, actually more than 4, because if we count the United States and some other country who involved with the planning and the delivery of the activity, will be more than 4, and the scope is beyond Asia or Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. Here's what we can see, the critical success factor and the key challenge. Let me start with the challenge first. As I mentioned, our operation is of regional scale or international scale. At least in the Southeast Asia region, we involve 4 countries speaking in at least 4 different languages. And the local community that we're working with are the people who directly manage the protected wetlands in those 4 countries. And many of them do not speak English. So we saw that the communication between academic institution and the community, we call the wetland manager at the local community that we work with, we speak different language. And and also for us, the people at the university, English is not our first language. All of us speak English as second language or third language. Some countries, they are more familiar with French than English. So the communication and the language barrier was perhaps the most important challenge. The way we overcome this challenge is to first train the core group of trainers. So that's how the original training workshop came in. So we use the material that IUCN provide to us that Katie mentioned briefly at the beginning, and combine with other training material suitable for the purpose of the training. And we develop our curriculum, lecture, and we bring together a core group of trainers, and we train them. And they themselves then will translate all of the training material into their own language. And they themselves conducted the national training workshop for the wetland manager. So that way we can overcome the problem of different languages in the region, and also the problem with communication across a vast area, different. We're talking about 120 wetland managers over many places, over 4 countries. The most important factor that contribute to the success of the program, I think, was built on the very strong partnership that have been built over a long period of time I just mentioned that Mekong Web University Network was established 20 years ago. And for the last 3 year operation, all of the country leader, team leader, they have been with us in the beginning of the network. They were actually the student or the trainee of our very first training course. We've been working together for a long time. We understand each other. We have a very good relationship with each other. And because of that strong partnership, we can develop the program, implementing the program in a very sufficient way. We can save a lot of time because we already know each other well. So I think in short that the key challenge and the success factor that we seen in our program. And that's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thuet, for your words of wisdom, and thank you, Katie, as well. I think what you mentioned about communication and the language barrier is something that we also find very challenging in the Pacific, with some countries having over hundreds of languages. So we really understand your challenge that you face, and I think it's great that you have initiatives such as training the trainers, which I think will also lead to long-term sustainability for these types of initiatives. So thank you very much. If I could just ask the tech team to go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce our next two speakers from the Australia Pacific Climate Partnership, or APCP, and the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program, SPREP. So our first speaker today is Dr. Hannah Barrowman. Hannah is a researcher with the APCP. She has a PhD in climate change adaptation and development, and specializes in community-based and community-driven adaptation. Our second speaker for today is Ms. Yvette Kerslake. She is a technical advisor for science to services at the Pacific Climate Change Center. Yvette has more than 10 years of work experience in environment and climate change, holding various senior positions in the UN and government agencies in Samoa and the region. Through her experience, she has managed a variety of research-based, evidence-driven projects throughout Pacific Island countries. Thank you so much for your time today. Hannah, if I could just pass over to you. Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you, Rachel. And thank you to all of the participants that have joined today. It's really great to have everyone involved. So today or tonight or this morning, I'll be talking about a collaborative research initiative currently being undertaken in the context of the Lima Adaptation Knowledge Initiative that was discussed at the start of this webinar. And as a bit of a background, so in early 2021, this initiative started working in the Pacific with a range of Pacific-based expert groups with the purpose of identifying and prioritizing key adaptation knowledge gaps for the Pacific region, focusing specifically on the Pacific small island developing states. So through a workshop process, the Lucky Initiative identified 65 critical knowledge gaps for supporting and carrying out adaptation in the Pacific, which more or less relate to things like lack of data or limited data, lack of access to that data and existing information, lack of actionable information, and lastly, a lack of tools and methods to process this information into actionable forms of knowledge. And at the same time, the organization that I work for, the Australia Pacific Climate Partnership, through its efforts and its mandate to integrate climate change information into Australia's aid program in the Pacific, is working to better understand the climate information and specific knowledge needs of a range of different groups that we work with in the Pacific. So this includes national governments, private sector, NGOs and civil society organizations, local community groups, and also faith-based organizations. In particular, we're really interested in understanding their needs, the challenges that they experience in accessing this climate information, as well as understanding, I guess, the challenges that they experience in understanding and also applying that information. So through the Lucky initiative, and sorry, IT, can we move to the next slide? Through the Lucky initiative, we have teamed up with a number of key organizations represented on the slide. So that includes the UNFCCC, the Global Adaptation Network, SPREP, ourselves, and also the University of Michigan, to start to look at some of these research gaps and close some of these research gaps. So the research project that we're going to be discussing today is carried out by a great team of master's students from the University of Michigan. And I'll now hand it over to them to discuss their new project, outline the research methods that they're taking, and also the research outputs. So IT, can we please play the video? Thank you.
Hi, we are 6 master students from the University of Michigan School for Environment and Sustainability. Our master project is overcoming barriers to accessing climate knowledge for scaling up climate action in the independent state of Samoa and Vanuatu. Our clients are the UNFCCC, UNEP, and APCP. In our project, we are tackling one of the key climate knowledge gaps for Samoa and Vanuatu, especially how women access, understand, and apply knowledge through climate information services. These have been identified through the Lima Adaptation Knowledge Initiative, and we will further build on them. We will conduct stakeholder interviews and create useful deliverables by the end of April 2023.
So as mentioned, we're focusing on Samoa and Vanuatu. These 2 countries share some key climate hazards. So there's an increase in daily rainfall that has been observed, sea level rise, ocean acidification, cyclones, coastal erosion, and the countries are also experiencing longer droughts that are occurring more frequently. But both countries also have institutions and initiatives that are collecting and disseminating climate information to protect against these hazards. So in Samoa, there's the Samoa Meteorology Division, and that is a robust hub for climate information that includes earwatch bulletins, tropical cyclone outlooks, and interactive educational simulation, among many other materials. And in Vanuatu, there's the Vanuatu Meteorology and Geohazards Department, which also features Earthwatch bulletins. Vanuatu also has a national advisory board, which works on disaster risk reduction and climate change policy, projects, and guidelines. And in 2019, they released an environmental and social management plan on mitigation and adaptation, which included mention of early warning systems. And then finally, both countries also have representatives from the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environmental Program, or SPREP, which is a partner in this project.
Our project is organized around 2 main objectives. The first of which is identifying needs, challenges, and barriers in Samoa and Vanuatu in relation to accessing, disseminating, and utilizing information from climate information services and early warning systems. The second objective is identifying best practices, both from the Pacific Islands and other contexts, in disseminating relevant and usable climate information to knowledge users, with attention to the particular experiences of women.
We have 2 main research questions. We are first asking, how do climate information services currently operate in Samoa and Vanuatu, and what climate information needs are currently unmet for women? More specifically, we ask, how does climate information reach the last mile? How are different stakeholders, including NGOs and decision makers, engaging with existing climate information services? What factors are limiting efficient and effective dissemination of climate information? And what barriers exist that might hinder engagement from women? Our second main question is, what best practices have already been identified in disseminating relevant, usable climate information to knowledge users with particular attention to women? And what new approaches should those managing climate information services in Vanuatu and Samoa consider adopting?
We'll be using a literature review and stakeholder interviews to answer our research questions. We will focus on a variety of stakeholders in this research, including national meteorological and hydrological services, national climate change ministries, departments, and divisions, policymakers specializing in climate adaptation and early warning systems, women's groups and those who work with women's groups, and as well as other intermediaries and stakeholders in the Pacific Island region. Our literature review will determine what best practices already exist in disseminating relevant, usable climate information to knowledge users. And then we will also use interviews to determine how these NMHSs and policymakers produce and disseminate information from early warning systems, and how NGOs, intermediaries, and local communities receive and engage with information from these systems. Both the literature review and interviews will identify current practices of climate information dissemination in Samoa and Vanuatu, and they will also be used to recommend best practices on how climate information systems can be used more effectively to enhance climate resilience of marginalized communities, specifically focused on women's groups and women themselves in Samoa and Vanuatu.
Our main focus for this project will be to create a comprehensive case study on both Samoa and Vanuatu with different aspects, including a needs assessment highlighting the challenges and barriers in disseminating climate information from climate information systems, a set of best practices identifying what new approaches stakeholders could consider adopting to better produce, manage, and disseminate climate information system reports with a specific focus on women. Policy recommendations meant for policymakers, NMHSs, national climate change ministries, and intergovernmental actors involved with producing and disseminating climate information. At the end of our project, we will deliver presentation to illustrate and discuss our findings. We're also hoping to work on additional deliverables as per time without compromising on the quality of our primary objectives. Thank you, and we really look forward to working on this project with all of your support.
Thank you so much to the University of Michigan students for that. I'd like to pass the time over now to Ms. Yvette Kerslake, please, for your remarks. Tech team, please, if we could just load up the presentation. I think it's a few slides ahead of this one, if I'm not mistaken.
Should be the next one. Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Hannah, as well. And just to acknowledge the students of Michigan University and also the Australian Partnership Pacific Climate Partnership, UNFCCC, the Global Adaptation Network, who we are partnering for this workshop through the Pacific Climate Change Center. It's alofa lava to all our audience this evening, morning, or afternoon. As you may be aware, we in the Pacific and small island development states, the leaders have recognized the need to address the adaptation and also mitigation priorities in the Pacific, and hence the establishment of the Pacific Climate Change Center. We are only 2 years old, established in 2019, and it's underpinned by strong partnerships with Pacific governments, applied research institutions, donors, and non-government organizations, crop agencies, and private sector. And these collaborations have led to innovative products which are increasing the resilience in the Pacific. So we're looking forward to research that would provide user-friendly, scientific, robust information on climate and meteorological science, climate change impacts and responses. And this information, as we are working closely with the University of Michigan and the Australia-Pacific Climate Partnership, will support more effective decision-making in Pacific communities. In saying this, we're ensuring that through the Pacific Climate Change Center, we're also ensuring to use IPCC findings as well as specific research as the scientific basis to provide services and products to be used by our Pacific Island countries for their climate action. And these are guided by our regional frameworks that are in place, which include the Roadmap for Strengthened Climate Services, the Pacific Island Meteorological Strategy, as well as the Pacific Climate Change Science and Services Research Roadmap. As you may be aware, and similar to other climate change centers across the Asia Pacific, our four main functions are cross-cutting across knowledge brokerage, applied research, training and capacity building, as well as innovation. And it is our belief that through the science and services function, it would provide a gateway for the Pacific out of this climate crisis and towards a more sustainable future for our Pacific countries and territories. Next slide, please. Yes, in terms of success factors for research in the Pacific in general, which is similar to other countries in the Asia Pacific, it's important that we build on existing relationships. Strong partnerships are built over time, and it's important that we use these existing partnerships or relationships through our national workbook networks, regional and international networks that exist within the Pacific, and to ensure that we work across all these stakeholders. Secondly, similar to other countries in the Pacific, it's very important. We have a traditional village setting, and there are certain village protocols that need to be observed before you can work with the community. So it's very important that we observe these village protocols as well as acknowledge the protocols that are in place, and this would also ensure the success of the research, ensuring that we are on the same page with the community and just gaining that trust and respect from the community. And last, in terms of success factors, is also considering the sustainability of research. So we look at this in different avenues. First of all, it's in terms of funding. There is limited funding in terms of research, but this is very important in terms of providing these data that would be used to inform decisions and policies in the future. So this is one avenue that we look towards as well, and one of the gaps that needs to be implemented. Also looking at, in terms of long-term partnership, we understand each research is unique because it all has their own concepts, they all have their own objectives that need to be addressed. But it's important that you would consider the previous research that is taken on, you build on and enhance the research for future priorities within the Pacific. And those would ensure that research in the Pacific will be successful. I'll now hand it over to Hannah to go through the challenges.
Thank you, Yvette. And I think, like Yvette said, some of these success factors and challenges have been talked or mentioned by our colleagues beforehand. But what we're finding is often there's quite a big disconnect or sometimes different expectations or needs between research communities and communities on the ground. So obviously researchers need to consider extending theories, having a lot of sort of theoretical applications, developing scientific papers, and contributing to the scientific community, I guess. Whereas communities sort of have real world needs, need really sort of practical impacts and sort of impacts that are going to affect them today and tomorrow. Another big challenge, and this is particularly the case in the Pacific because it's such a big takes up a big geographical space, is the monetary costs of engagement. Obviously, there's a lot of costs involved in travel and staying in communities, and sort of, I guess it reduces the ability to do sort of extensive field work and ongoing field work. So that's one of the challenges that we've experienced. And another is just the time and capacity for communities to engage. People have jobs, people have things that they need to be doing every day. And so the capacity to, I guess, partake in interviews and focus group discussions in adding to the research needs, I guess, is often limited just because they have everyday things to be getting on with. And that is all from us. So back to you, Rachel.
Hannah and Yvette, thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. I'd just like to bring everybody's attention to the fact that because of our diverse and very interesting presentations today, we unfortunately do not have time to do the interactive Jamboard session that was originally planned for this time. However, I believe Helen has posted the link in the chat box. So this is essentially, this slide here on the screen is essentially what the interactive exercise looks like. We are hoping that you'll be able to complete this at your convenience. We've put some examples up already for you to think through and try and add what you can. And we'd really, really value your input to these. So please, if you could just follow the link that has been provided by Helen. And I believe that a follow-up email will be sent also with this link as well. Apologies for that, but we really didn't want to cut any of the presentations too short today because we know that all of this information is very important and very relevant to this type of work throughout the Asia Pacific region. If I may, we would just go to the next slide, please, tech team. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite the closing remarks from Mozaharul Alam, or Babu for short. Apologies for mispronouncing your name. He is the Regional Coordinator for Climate Action at UNEP Asia and the Pacific Office and the head of the APAN Secretariat based in Thailand. So he joined the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, in 2009, and he provides strategic and technical guidance to design and implement climate change actions in the region. Please, I'd like to invite Babu at this time to provide closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel, for introduction. I think I'm going to do two things, Rachel. One is trying to give you very quick, the key points came out from the discussion, and then obviously making some closing the remarks. In this session, what we have heard from the very beginning, that the climate change adaptation knowledge gap remains, and the partnership is a key means to address these gaps. And then when we talk about the partnership, it's primarily the partnership we talked about today is the partnership with the universities, the academic institutions, and the research communities. And the key factor of the success has also been mentioned is the partnership, which need to be built on the existing structure and the capacity. Also, this partnership needs to build on the common ground of needs, and these needs are the community needs, the needs in the cities. And also the ownership has been highlighted very much in terms of not only the success of the partnership, but also sustaining the collaboration and sustaining the partnership. And that is the ownership. What we have also heard in terms of the role of the universities, at least the three things that I'd like to mention. One is the knowledge generation and supporting the validation of the work at the community level. Also pairing between the universities and the cities. But also one of the important aspects came during the discussion is how to bring back the knowledge generated at the national level by the universities, by the researcher, and feeding into the university curricula as a teaching material. What we have also heard in terms of challenges, I think there are several, but I'd like to just highlight a couple of them, is the location or the geographical location of the university or the research institutes or the partners and the community. It's the geographical distances. That also linked to the budget issues. But I think also other aspect came very clearly is the language and also the respecting the local context. And that context can be cultural, the issue of time, but also in the partnership, one of the challenges is the difference in the expectation. So those are the key messages that I'd like to just highlight what I have heard during this webinar. Now, let me move to my last part. I'd like to thank all of you who participated in this webinar and also the partners who help us delivering this webinar, including the Rachel, you moderating this session. I know in Asia and the Pacific region, time difference isn't a big thing, but I thank the colleague who participating from the Pacific, particularly the colleague from the spread. I know that it is not easy for colleague in the Pacific joining in this the sessions. I'd like to special thanks to all the colleagues who joined from the Pacific Island countries. I'd like to thank all partners, particularly the partners who contributed during the design of this webinar, as well as for helping us delivering it. And I'd like to thank also my colleagues who work hard, not only designing, but also working with all of you in designing and delivering this webinar. And we are looking forward for our continued collaboration within the framework of Asia Pacific Adaptation Network. Many of you have contributed in past, and I'm looking forward to have your continued contribution and collaboration with you. With that, I'd like to thank again all of you, and Rachel, over to you just to say bye and thank everyone.
Thank you so much, Babu, for summing that up so well. I think that you've highlighted all the key points from this webinar, and it's given us a lot of food for thought moving forward. And I hope that everybody who has joined us today will have the time to participate in the Google Jamboard that has been shared by Helen. I'd also like to just take this time quickly to thank the APAN Secretariat, the organizing committee for this webinar, as well as our technical support who is online with us today. But thank you so much to all the speakers who have participated. Thank you so much for the participants, who have made our discussion so lively today. We've had close to 20 questions come in through the Q&A box. So thank you so much for those contributions. We'll be taking those back and hopefully we can get back to you with answers or, way forwards in the future. At this point in time, my job is done. So I would like to say thank you as well for having me on board. And I'd like to hand over to Helen just for a final word and goodbye. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone. We are already a little bit over time. So thank you again for joining us today. And I wish we would have had time for the exercise, but happy if you can all contribute offline if you wish to. And thank you, and see you for our next webinar sometime in July. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.